Hi, this is Gina Ann Costigan with 50 and Fabulous, what I've learned through the trenches, sponsored by Main Street Mortgage. And what I have to say here today is what we're doing with the podcast and who I've been able to interview has been such an important part, I think, of my business and our business, because I've gotten to meet so many wonderful, fantastic women and men. So I'm so excited to introduce today someone that I've met through eWomen Network and I think one other of our networking groups. And she is just extraordinary. She has done and accomplished so many things, and I'm so excited to introduce today Miss Homeyra Faghihi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here, Gina.
You're welcome. I hope I got the name right.
You did it perfectly. Thank you.
The last name. I know the first name. So just a little bit about Miss Homeyra. She has been 11 years married, correct?
Yes.
And just recently moved to the Thousand Oaks area from Woodland Hills.
Correct.
Okay. So how do you like it so far?
It's different out here.
Different.
I lived in different parts of LA for like 38 years. So this is my first time in Ventura County.
Suburbia.
Yes, there are less cars, less
Yep.
people.
Do you like it?
I like that it's so green and more
Yeah.
quiet. On the other hand, it's not happening.
You're used to so many restaurants out in the valley.
Oh God,
Yeah.
yes.
It's
Woodland Hills especially.
Yes. What made you guys move?
We wanted maybe something a house a little bigger than what we could have afforded in that particular neighborhood
Gotcha.
where
Yes,
we're
Woodland
in
Hills is
before.
pricey right now.
Yes, and also a little more green and quiet. My husband wanted that more than I
Okay.
did.
So you did the compromise.
Yes, yes.
You got the bigger house and he got the green and quiet.
Yes.
Well, we're off topic there a little bit, but I was just curious to
Sure,
what made you
sure.
come to to suburbia. You have so many talents and you've done so many things in the last 24 years that you've been a licensed clinical social worker. But you work with women and you also are certified domestic violence counselor.
Yes.
How did you get involved in so many areas here and also becoming the founder of Power to Self online coaching and the creator of Empowerment for Blueprint? I mean, this is a mouthful.
Yes.
So I can only imagine what 24 years went into putting into this and becoming, an empowerment coach
Yes.
and so forth.
Yes. So, aside from being a therapist / coach for all these years, also my own personal life as an immigrant coming here by myself. I mean, that was a whole story of empowerment right there, which we won't go into.
Well, that's interesting, though.
Yes.
When did you come here?
1985
Okay.
is when I got here to Los Angeles.
Okay.
I mean LA. And so just being on my own, being by myself. I did live with a family member for the first year that I was here. However, I was still very independent and not have any money, not knowing the language. I had to take care of everything on my own.
So when you came, you did not know the language at all?
I knew grammar, but I didn't understand English. Like if people spoke to me, to give you an idea, the first movie I ever saw was.
I'm like, that's brave.
The Breakfast Club. Do you remember that?
Oh
movie?
yeah.
I did not understand a word of it. I was bored out of my mind. I also felt so out of place because everybody's laughing at every single line.
And you're going, why are these people laughing?
And especially that movie, there's no action to follow. Usually there's a story through action that you can follow even if you don't understand, but there's just 5 kids talking the whole time.
The whole time. Now everything you watch has subtitles, so you can
Yes.
I even like watching movies sometimes with the subtitles just because I can follow it faster.
Yeah, so anyway, it's not just is my point, not just the 24 years of being a therapist and now coach, also my own personal life and, all the relationship stuff that I went through and dealt with. And so to answer your question more specifically, in the 24 years, the second part of it, for I would say about 9 years, I worked at the VA, Department of Veterans
I remember
Affairs.
We talked about that.
Yes, in women's clinic. And so all my clients were women. And this was the first time where all my clients were women. I didn't work with anybody else. And I enjoyed it so much. I enjoyed it so much.
Fulfilling
I
for you.
connected with the ladies so well. And that kind of became my focus as to, okay, I really enjoy working with the ladies and helping them be empowered. Although I wasn't an empowerment coach. I was a social worker and a therapist at the time, but that's what I did essentially. And one of the things that I noticed when I did a lot of, initial assessment when the veterans
yes.
first came in, I noticed that the subject of domestic violence kept coming up. And we had all sorts of groups there in Women's Clinic that I ran some of them. I created several groups there. There were other therapists who were doing group services. But I was like, why don't we have a group to address domestic violence? We have all these other groups and nothing for domestic violence, intimate partner violence. And so I went out there and got the certificate, developed the group, designed the group, and offered it, which was the first one at the VA, which was amazing to me. It's like, how do you not? It was just interesting to me that
it became a passion of yours.
Yes, very much so. And so even though I did many other groups, but that one really just did.
Are you still working with the VA now?
No, I resigned over 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and that's when I turned it. Well, I still do a little bit of therapy, but mostly I work as an empowerment coach now and working with women to, especially women who have a difficult time with saying no.
Yeah, so I saw that.
Yes, so I teach them how to say no and how to set boundaries, know what their boundaries are. And so it all started from there.
So when you say how to say no, that could be something I can learn from, because I tend to say yes to so many things. And then I end up saying, like, I look at my calendar and I double book myself.
Yeah.
And that's almost embarrassing because I have to go back and say, okay, I'm so sorry. I can't make it here. I can't make it here. And it's just saying no. So this year I'm trying to say no to a few more things, only because I can give my attention so much more when I'm actually doing something and not worrying about the next thing on my calendar.
Exactly.
So giving more time and giving more of my attention and attention to detail. So
yes,
I think we all can learn from saying no in different areas of our life. And maybe that's not exactly what you're addressing, but saying no in general.
Yes, saying no, because a lot of times what happens is we forget that our needs are just as important as the needs of the other person. And we keep putting them ahead of us. And some of that comes from that desire to want to belong. I want to belong. I don't want to feel rejected. I don't want you to feel rejected. I want us to belong. So I'm going to say yes to you, even though I know my plate is already full.
Yeah.
And so because we forget that our own needs matter, we forget that authenticity matters, we just keep giving in to the other person. And especially if there's history of being mistreated, being abused, being in a toxic relationship, whether that's the history, in your childhood or with a partner or with a boss or, in the military with people above you. If that has been the experience, then we're used to taking care of the other person's needs,
putting them
forget our own needs. So it's really important to just be aware that my needs are important too.
That's so true. It's very interesting that, that's some of the things that you do talk about. And I find that very interesting. You also talk a little bit about power to self. Where did that come from?
Yes. So the name, you mean power to self?
Power to self. Where did it come from? And then becoming the empowerment coach. And the difference between, I'm just going to throw a couple of things your way, the difference between coaching and psychotherapy. So
yes. Okay, so
power
to the self came from or was inspired by power to the people, the phrase power to the people. I have always have had this passion of how we as people, we need to speak to our power. We need to stand up for ourselves, because a lot of times people at the top, many times they don't really care about us. So it's like that has always been my passion, how important it is that as a people we recognize our power. So then power to the self came from that, meaning there's that fear that takes control of our life, the fear that runs the show on the inside, and how we want to take our power back from the fear that's running the show on the inside. So
it's so true, everything you're saying. Like, I don't think about these things, and now what you're saying, it's like, it's so true.
Yes.
How we just kind of put gas in our tank and we go.
Yes.
Even though our tank could be sometimes running out low, we continue to go and go. My daughters are constantly telling me, Mom, you need to slow down. I don't even know what the word means, but just last night, I'm like, yeah. but
Yeah.
constantly saying that. So I understand what you're
Yes.
saying.
To just, that I'm not talking about you, but in general, I
Yeah.
don't know you that well, Gina. So I'm just speaking generally. Many times when we are on the go is because we just don't want to sit by ourselves for a moment. It's like, what would happen if I sat with me, if I attended to me for 10 minutes or 5 minutes? And we all do that. I do that.
Right.
I'm like on the go a lot. And my
Right.
husband sometimes has to remind me, okay,
Sit down a little bit.
time to sit and not
Time
do
out.
anything. Put your phone away, you know. So we all do that, I think. So power to the self is about recognizing that a lot of times fear takes over, and we need to take the power back. The self back, bring it back to the self and not to fear. And so that's where the name came from.
I like
power
that.
to the self. And in terms of the difference between coaching
and the psychotherapy.
So how, excuse me.
Sure.
The way that I practice them differently, and it may apply to many of the therapists who also do coaching as well, but I speak for myself. So as a therapist, of course, it's my job to provide a diagnosis for my client. As a coach, I do not do that. I don't provide diagnoses. I don't work with issues that are related to a diagnosis. Generally, as a coach, we don't do that. And many of my clients, by the way, coaching clients, they have therapy on the side. So, because the focus is different. There might be a little bit of overlap, but for the most part, the focus is different. And as a therapist, many times the work takes longer because I go deep into the past a lot more than I would do as a coach. As a coach, I do not, obviously everybody has a past, and the past is brought up, and we discuss it, and how the person is affected by their past, we do talk about it, but it's not so much as a coach. And again, myself, I'm not saying all coaches and therapists do this the same way, but I don't spend too much time in the past with coaching. It's mostly about how are you affected by your past? Let me get an understanding. Okay, and now how are we going to deal with the present and the future?
Yeah.
And what else? The other differences. So as a result, usually therapy takes longer. Coaching takes a little shorter amount of time. Generally speaking, it's not always the case, but generally that can be the case, that therapy takes longer. And also how I do coaching different from therapy. When a therapy client comes in, if you've done therapy, you would know, you just talk about whatever's been on your mind, on your heart, and you just want to talk about that.
Kind of just let it go.
Yes. So most people do therapy that way. As a coach, though, I have a program. Depending on the issue that you come in, I design a program. So let's say we will agree that for the next, let's say 10 weeks that we work together, these are all focus for the whole 10 weeks. And then, so I have a little bit of material that I start the session with. We will discuss the material. And then of course, we'll discuss how the client relates to the material. So they're learning some tools and also learning how they connect with it. And based on that, they would come up with a commitment for the week, so that between now and next week, they're going to work on whatever they got from that discussion that we had today. So the main difference is that there is a little bit of structure in how I do
coaching.
In the coaching, there's a specific focus. Let's say you say that, for example, we want to work on shame because shame keeps getting in the way. So I designed a few weeks discussing shame. Loose structure. It's not. I'm not rigid, but I do have some things that I want to make sure that you understand about shame if you're my client and this is what you came in for.
Interesting.
So there's a structure to my sessions.
Now, is it mostly women that you're working with, or do you work with men as well?
I work with men as well. I don't advertise it because I don't have groups for men, not at this point anyway. So if I do have a man client right now who I'm seeing individually, and it's going great.
Oh, good.
But I don't advertise it because if they want to join one of my groups, I don't have a mixed group and I don't have a men's group. But I do see men also.
No, I have that passion to work with women and to help them, only just because, I always say if I would have known now what I knew when I got divorced years and years and years ago, I would be 5 steps ahead. Because I was young, I was naive, I didn't take the advice of people that tried to help me.
Yeah.
Because I was in a madness. My mind was, you're
Yeah.
not thinking clearly.
Yes.
And it took me
So
years to
true.
figure that out.
For myself, the
Yeah.
same. It's all the things that I know now. And my clients, almost all of them say, if, like, let's say when we discuss the differences between healthy and unhealthy relationships or healthy and unhealthy boundaries, almost every single one says, I wish I knew this when I was a teenager and my life would be different. And, same true for me as well. I didn't know this stuff.
Right.
I
We
learned it.
grow. Every year we grow up even
Exactly.
more.
Exactly. So that's true for many of us.
Yes, definitely just knowing, and having the resources and who to turn to, and having a good, group of resources. And I think that's the difference now for me. I have such a
Yes.
great network of resources that I can turn
Yes.
to that I did and I didn't back then. So,
Yes.
but that's
Yes.
many, many moons ago.
The social worker in me just loves resources.
Yeah, and that's true.
Let me refer you to this person and that person. Yes.
And you need
sure.
that in your, I call it my book of business, my resources.
Yes.
But with the coaching factor, and it's 10 weeks. Is that just a structure for everyone, or just
no,
does
I
that
just
vary?
came up with that number.
Okay.
Usually people come to me for 16 weeks as a 4-month program.
Okay.
And this is the other part that's different from therapy. So if there's a coaching client, they do have access to me between sessions. So we exchange voicemails
They can text.
They can text, we can voicemail so that I can support them between sessions. With my therapy clients, I do not do that.
Okay.
And so it's 16 weeks of weekly sessions plus the support between.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But if somebody wants to come in, depending on what they tell me, we discuss together, we decide, okay, in your case, maybe you want to do just 6 sessions for right now.
It's independent. I mean, it changes per person, I'm sure.
Yes.
Is it business coaching at all, or is it mostly personal?
It's personal empowerment. Coaching. Yes.
Okay, so it's all empowerment and
yes.
Very interesting.
How to connect with the self and, as I said, take the power back on the inside, because many times we're not even aware of it, but many times it's the self-judgment and the shame and the guilt and all these internal turmoil that gets in the way of living our best life.
Moving forward.
Yes,
you get stuck in the mud. I call it put your feet and you get stuck and you can't move forward.
Exactly.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting. I'm learning a lot today here. Let's see. What are the red flags you would say to pay attention to at the beginning of a romantic relationship?
Oh, I have a long list of that. But I'm going to just whatever's.
I'm just laughing a little bit for myself over here.
Yeah, I do have a long list, but let me see the ones that I have on the top of my mind. This is not to say, by the way, that everybody that does some of these things is going to turn out to be an abusive person or a toxic type person. I see, by the way, there's a difference between abusive and toxic, the way I see it. But anyway, that may be another discussion. But for example, if somebody wants to move way too quickly, that's a red flag. Again, it doesn't mean that necessarily all people who move quickly are going to turn out to be a not so good person. Right. But in general, we want to be aware of that. They meet you in 2 weeks, or like, let's move in together, or let's get engaged, or that's a red flag, because that doesn't it doesn't, with a healthy person, that doesn't sit well. Of course, if there's history of a lot of not getting attention, that's very flattering.
Of course,
that's very flattering, and that's why we go for it. Excuse me. But so that's one. Another is if they do huge favors, like out of ordinary, like huge favors for you. Like they just met you and they're willing to lend you a bunch of money, or they're willing to give you jewelry.
Okay, I'm not gonna. Just kidding.
Again, it's flattering, right? This person.
But there's something that's to be said for that.
Because a lot of times that's done. Again, not in every situation. Right. I'm not saying that everybody who buys big gifts, they have, some plans for your future and not so good plans for your future. But many times when that happens is because they want to hold that over your head. They want to control you in the future. Yeah. Many times that is the case. How can you say I don't love you when I gave you $2,000 right after we met? You said you needed money and I gave you $2,000. Isn't that love?
Yeah.
So it becomes a way to control the other person. So we don't want to take huge gifts. Or we don't want to give huge gifts, because this is all, it becomes it becomes a thing that
it's a power that they can hold over your head.
Yes, for sure. Or if we do that, we can also hold that over their head. We don't. So that's actually where setting boundaries come into play. So that many times we don't understand that taking big gifts right at the beginning or giving huge gifts, that's a boundary issue. And many times we don't recognize that.
No, I mean, that's interesting that it's true. It is very true.
Yeah.
When you're in the dating world or whatever it may be, but you have to really kind of have to understand, when you put yourself out there and you are in the dating world, it's kind of like, what are your red flags? And someone asked me, what are your green flags? I get asked that all the time. And it's just like, I had to think about that one. I'm like, green flags. I gotta think. But it's just kind of doing a checks, check the boxes, and those boxes can be different for everybody.
Yes. And I have, like I said, I have a long list. But the other thing I want to say is, if they from the beginning they're trying to tell you, how to dress, who to see, when to go out.
Yeah.
That's more on the obvious side. Some of these signs are not very obvious, but some are more obvious. I mean, the most obvious is if they get angry and they blow up too quickly.
Yeah, that's
all of those. Or if they keep putting you down, if they criticize you consistently, it's like nothing you do is good enough. I mean, these are more obvious.
Right.
But again, maybe not that obvious to somebody who's coming from a background of abusive parents.
Unhealthy past, unhealthy relationships,
or an abusive boss. I mean, if you've worked at a place for 5-10 years and you're constantly being put down by your boss, that does something to the psyche.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, I'm learning. This is like a whole session for myself today.
Oh.
But I think I'm going to go ahead and probably finish up here.
Sure.
And I've learned a lot, and I think our listeners will learn a lot too. So you are definitely 50 and fabulous, and you have accomplished so much just by everything, by not knowing the language, by your education, by your coaching, and just helping the VA and everything. I mean, that sets so warmly too in my heart. I'm definitely somebody that comes from a long line of veterans. My dad, my grandfather, my uncle, so
really?
I've all served. Yes.
Oh, wow. Lots of love.
Yeah, so that's where I feel the same. So, but thank you, and I look forward to seeing you at our next event. I know my dear roomie loves you, so my roommate. So it's all coming together. But thank you, Homeyra.
Thank you, Gina, so much for this conversation, for having me here, for being so kind and warm. We met a few months ago. Yeah. Every interaction with you has been warm, and I just love being around you. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
You're welcome. I look forward to more. Thank you.
Same here.
Bye.
Thank you.